Hey guys, Varanice here with the new auto chest patch notes. Let's get into it. Up first, we've got Shadow Devil. Shadow Devil is finally being re-released to the game. He's getting a visual update and his abilities being buffed slightly. He's also getting a slight HP increase from what he had on the test server, getting an additional 100 health on 1 star and 200 health at 2 star and 400 health at 3 star. This will help him be a little bit more tanky, especially if you want to use him as a frontline unit. In comparison to something like Thunder Spirit, I felt like he was a little bit squishier on the test server, so I think that this should help a bit, let him stay live longer to get second or third ult off in things like Divinity. He'll be interesting in things like Divinity Warlock potentially. I'm excited to try him there, but let me know in the comments if there's a build that you're particularly excited to try out Shadow Devil in. For buffs, we've got Six Beast is getting a 2 damage increase to its stacking damage, going from 14 to 16. Next, we've got Greater. Greater is getting an additional 5% chance to cast Spatial Imprisonment and get a physical damage bonus to the units that it's attacking. Wyvern is getting 50 additional health at 1 star, 100 additional health at 2 star, and 200 additional health at 3 star. Wyvern is generally one of the most unpopular units in the game. It has interesting typing, being Dragon Aggressive Mage, but at the moment, that doesn't see a ton of play. I think this is probably a reasonable change. Maybe we'll see slightly more like early Wyvern 2-star tank play or something like that. Next, we've got a buff to Flame Wizard. Flame Wizard is getting slightly more damage on her ult. It's getting 50 damage at 1 star, 50 damage at 2 star, and 100 damage at 3 star. I think this is probably good. She got really hurt when they changed her from a 3 cost to a 2 cost. So I think giving her some of that damage back to her ult makes sense. Next we've got nerfs. They're nerfing 9 Feathered. 9 Feathered illusions will last 2 seconds less. I'm not sure that this is a terribly impactful change. I think that this will make it deal slightly less damage to opponents that just get obliterated by 9 Feathered. So it's probably reasonable in helping mitigate the maximum damage potential that the build can do, but I don't know that this necessarily weakens its power level at all. Next we've got a nerf to Cura 2. Cura 2 is having its maximum possible stacks reduced from 8 to 6. I think this is a really important change. At the moment, Insect Red Fox is very, very strong, and the Cura Glove really pushes that build over the top. So mitigating how insane that can get, I think, is probably a pretty reasonable change to make. I don't think that this will impact other applications of the Cura Gloves nearly as much, because many of the other builds that will play it don't push past 6 stacks that often anyway. So I think this mostly impacts insects. Next, we've got a nerf to Divinity. Divinity is losing 5% cooldown reduction at Divinity 2 and Divinity 4. Probably reasonable. Divinity can cause some pretty powerful interactions, especially with legendaries getting particularly low cooldowns. I don't know that this is necessary. At the moment, like, Divinity Horn Shaman already just got nerfed very, very heavily in the previous patch, and the only other Divinity build that we really see at the moment is Divinity Cave. And I didn't feel like that it was particularly oppressive, but maybe they're worried about some of the other changes in this patch influencing Divinity. So we'll see. It's not a huge change, so this shouldn't make too much of a difference either way. And finally, we've got a nerf to Red Fox Swordsman. Red Fox Swordsman is losing 1 of his thrusts at all star rarities. So at 2 star in particular is really important. He's going from 4 to 3, so that's going to be effectively a 25% damage reduction, which is pretty significant. It also means less chances to hit like a crit proc, apply Oblivion, or things like that. I think this is very, very significant. Might be the biggest change in this patch, honestly. We'll have to see if Red Fox is still really busted after this, or if this is enough of a nerf to kind of bring it within a more reasonable realm within the meta. Dwarf 1 has been temporarily removed from the game. Dwarf 2 is now giving all allies increased range by 2 grids, dealing extra damage equal to the number of grids between the 2 sides times 5. So, for example, if you have a unit that normally has 4 attack range and it gets Dwarf 2, then it can attack from up to 6 tiles away, so it would get 30% extra damage. This seems pretty good. As we'll get to in a second, there is an item that gives Dwarf now. So you could play this with Sniper to get Dwarf 2 pretty early. Seems interesting. We'll have to see how good it is. Next, we've got a change to Venom. Venom is being changed from a 3-cost to a 2-cost unit and is getting a slight health nerf to bring him more in line with the health pool generally available to 2-cost units. I'm pretty excited for this change. I want to definitely try out going for like Venom 3-star in things like 9 Feathered or like 9 Mage potentially. It looks like it could be pretty fun, particularly in 9 Mage. Next, we've got some item adjustments. Black Ice Lance is now going to be Burst Rifle. Burst Rifle gives 25 attack, 10% evasion. It gives Dwarf Synergy and attacks one additional enemy for 15% of their base attack damage. So this is kind of giving half of the splitter effect to the epic item below it, which kind of brings it to a more direct comparison to what Cleave does for melee units. This is a pretty reasonable change, I think. They also changed the recipe, so it no longer requires the staff item, Magic Wand, and uses a coin instead. I think that also makes a lot of sense. No one really built this to put on spellcasters. This was always meant on like a ranged attack carry, so I think the evasion makes a lot more sense than having spell damage. I'm interested to see also how strong this is in the early game. This could be a really good item if ranged carries are able to transition into a strong build in the late game. So maybe building this early on with the intention of going into something like 9 Hunter maybe. You could play it with Sniper to get Dwarf 2 very, very early on the game. Potentially even on round 4. So it's something interesting to try out. Might make the early game a little bit different than on previous patches. Holy Spirit Lance will now be called Split Arrow, and it also is getting the 10% evasion from the coin as a part of the Burst Rifle recipe. It also is giving Dwarf, and then it's retaining the previous splitter effect of hitting 2 additional enemies for 30% damage. There's not a whole lot to say here. I think this is interesting. Potentially getting Dwarf Synergy or Dwarf 2 more accessibly. I'm curious if the splitter effect will also get the AI from the Dwarf. So like if the primary shot will hit something that's weak, and if the 2 additional shots will hit something that's weak, or if it'll just hit the nearest things to what it's targeting. That'll be interesting to test out. It shouldn't be too hard. You should be able to figure that out within a game or two. Next, we've got Iceplate. Iceplate is losing the evasion from being built with coin and is getting ability damage because it's now being built with Magic Wand. I think this is pretty reasonable as well, similar to the splitter. It won't be nearly as oppressive on things like Warpwood, but I think this will help it quite a lot on units like God of War and Thunder Spirit. Will particularly really benefit from this frontline units that kind of do a lot of spell damage. Ice Armor is getting the same change as well. It's getting 15% ability damage from the base item from the staff. So again, I think this will be very good on Gao and Thunder Spirit. If you enjoy my content, leave a like on the video and consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out a lot. Thanks for watching, guys.